love that. Whose kids are these?
All right, good morning. Welcome back to another history episode of Courtney's class. We're learning about Napoleon and the dictator stuff today, right? See. Yesterday, Sophia was in the picture. Oh, can't believe it, Sophia. You saw your face? All right. So, yesterday we got to the point where Napoleon is in charge, yeah? So now we got to talk about Napoleon as a dictator, and then we're going to move on to Napoleon as an emperor, because he's going to sort of modify his role towards this whole thing. There's something I want to talk about first, though, as far as democracy goes. What do you guys think the reason is that? Well, first of all, is France still in a revolution? This guy's going to be in charge for like 20 years. So is the revolution over or still going? First, we should define what are we trying to accomplish with the revolution, right? That will help us understand if it's done or not. What were they trying to accomplish? Out with the old regime, which is what kind of rule? Absolute monarchy, right? Is a military dictator any different than an absolute king? Yeah, different title, same smell, though different nostril, right? You guys understand what I mean? It's like the same kind of thing, different title. So, is the revolution over then? If we think that it's basically the same thing 4 years later, are they still revolting or what? You think so? Well, do the people want Napoleon? Yeah. To answer the question of are they still revolting, we kind of have to identify with, first of all, who started the revolution, and did they get what they wanted out of the revolution, right? So who started the revolution? The Third Estate. In particular, what part of the Third Estate? Think about the events we talked about back when King was still king, right? With the National Assembly. The women march on Versailles, and they take the king, queen back to Paris, right? The people of Paris storm the Bastille prison, right? Who are those people? Those are the people that are doing the actions of the revolution, right? Who are they? Is it the bourgeoisie? No. The bourgeoisie definitely going to play a role, and they're definitely going to lead the revolutions. But the people who started it are the lower class people, right? They're the ones that were hungry enough and broke enough to do the revolting. You guys follow me? So did they get what they want? No. What did they want? They want what? Democracy. What was that? Democracy. Okay, did they get democracy? Well, the governments were democratic, right? So is it that they wanted that democracy? They wanted a say in the democracy. Did they get that? They didn't, did they? The lower class people, they got the system they wanted, but they didn't get the voice that they wanted. Right? And so, were they ever satisfied? No. Think about it, guys. I mean, 80% of the population didn't get a voice in the government. 80% of the population didn't get a say. But they were the ones doing the revolting. So are they satisfied? No. No. They're not. Because they don't have what they want yet. Right? Do they have it with Napoleon? They got to choose Napoleon. That's kind of nice. But do they have democracy under Napoleon? No, so that's kind of a bummer. What if Napoleon ends up being different than they want him to be? Are they going to be able to do anything about it? No. So do they have what they want? Did their government that they have, or the governments that they have, do they fulfill the social contract? We choose you, but you listen to us? They haven't, right? So, is the revolution over? Maybe just on pause. right? While Napoleon rules, they're okay and it's going to be something. But when Napoleon's done, what then? What do we do then, right? Does his kids become king? That's just like a king then, right? Do we vote for another guy? How does it work, right? So this whole thing is kind of in the air. It's kind of on pause. Does that make sense? Because Napoleon took over because the people asked him. Now, can democracies work without everybody having a say? Is the social contract like half of us will vote for you to rule us and then you have to listen to half of us? Is that what the social contract says? No, it says all of us and everybody, right? So can democracy work without everybody having a say? Not really. That's important for us to understand. Because they tried 4 different kinds, right? And they're doing it during the time when everybody else is finding success making democracies. Britain just made one, constitutional monarchy, works still, right? America made one at the same time, works still. They made 4 different kinds and none of them work. Why?
Because not everyone is it.
Because who's not voting? Who doesn't have a say? The lowest class in particular, but then if we get more specific, women, serfs, like all these different people, right? If not everybody has a say, then democracy can't work. And we've seen that in America. For instance, in the 1800s, about halfway through our history, we couldn't continue with the democracy we had because this large group of people didn't have a say. So, sort of, it became such an issue that we had to go to war over it. Who's that group of people? Slaves. The democracy literally wouldn't work correctly because not everybody had a say. Does that make sense? Do you guys see how it's not just the government, right? It's sort of like a social guideline. And if not everybody gets a say, then the social aspect of this place deteriorates. Do you guys see that? Because eventually they're going to get frustrated they don't have a say. They're living by other people's rules. And so then what do you do when you're frustrated? You act out, and then other people respond, and it just snowballs. Can you guys see that? Right? Same thing happened. After we let the slaves vote, it only lasted about 50 years, and we had, again, a major breakdown in our democracy because a large portion of the population couldn't vote. Who are they? Women. Right? So we had to go through this whole, progressive movement. We had to change a lot of rules, and there was a lot of tension. There's always going to be a group of people who wants only who currently votes to vote. And there's always going to be a group of people who want to get in on the vote. They want to get in on the say. Right? We have it right now. It's a huge portion of the population that's not allowed to have a voice. And there's a huge portion of the population that has a voice that don't want them to. Who are they? No? That's up for debate. Underage people are up for debate because are they educated enough to have to be responsible with it? Maybe, maybe not, right? Who's that portion of the population?
Citizens versus non-citizens?
Yeah, immigrants, right? Are there millions of members of America? I say members because they live here, they participate in every aspect of our society, all right? Positively influence most aspects of it, but yet don't have a voice. Is there a large group of those people? Millions of people out there. I say members because can we say citizens? No, because they don't have a voice. They don't have a say, right? And eventually they will or they won't, and time will move on, and then there'll be another group like that. Do you guys understand? In America, we've been successful enough and open enough to allow those groups in and continue our democracy. It still works. But there's been a bunch of examples where it stopped working because they wouldn't let those guys be part of it. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, it's important for us to sort of see that big picture and understand about the democracy is such a bigger thing than just government. It's literally a way that we all have to go about it. Right? We all, if I get to say whatever I want, what do I have to allow you guys to do? Say whatever we want. That's such a hard thing for people. Do you think everybody in America understands that? I don't either. Right? Is it an easy thing to understand? It kind of is. It's basic, right? It's elementary, but at the same time, is it easy to swallow? And that's something that we really need to work on. If we work on that in ourselves every day, right? Just listening to the things that we don't want to hear, because you know at some point you're going to say something somebody doesn't want to hear, right? That makes every little bit better. If we can do our part, everybody does their part. Hopefully we can get somewhere with that. But as far as France goes, Napoleon's now in charge, and the lowest class haven't had a say. Are they going to get one, do you think? No. Nah, not if we got a dictator. So are they going to be totally happy? Is this democracy or this quasi-government thing, is it going to work long term? Why not? Because not everybody has a say. That's the bottom line. Okay? So Napoleon as dictator, he sets up a government called the consulate. All right, this is him right away creating the consulate. I would say write these things under this, if that was you. Oh, we got out of order a little bit. So the consulate first is an executive and a legislative branches of government. He sets up similar to a democracy because he wants the people to feel like they still got that thing, right? So in the executive branch, there are 3 consuls. That's like 3 board members or 3 advisors or whatever you want to call them. Obviously, Napoleon is the first consul. He's like #1 head honcho consul. And the other 2 are advisors to him, with him. Napoleon and the consul, technically the 3 consuls, control the military, make all the laws, and appoint all government members. But since Napoleon is the first consul, he does all that stuff, and they sort of watch. Because he's a dictator. Does that make sense to you guys? He sort of pretends he's got help, or he pretends he's talking to those guys, but he totally doesn't have to. All right. The legislative branch, which is the representatives, the people, right? They only have authority to accept or reject Napoleon's decisions. And rejecting Napoleon's decisions often is dangerous because he's got a ferocious temper. Chihuahua style. Huh?
Oh, my dog has a temper too. He's just like
Little,
annoying.
big bark,
I know.
small bite. Okay. As part of the consulate, he writes a constitution, a consulate constitution. And the consulate constitution essentially says all the things Napoleon wants it to say. Talks about the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. He's basically going to honor those things. But it is approved by a plebiscite. And that's like a underlined word. A plebiscite is a strictly yes or no vote only. No, like, yeah, maybe this, or like, no, but this. It's straight yes or no vote, and it's by the people to approve the Constitution or not. The plebiscite's like, don't make suggestions. Either you like it or you don't. Live with it. And so it's kind of, well, it's not perfect, but it's all right, so I'll take it as opposed to nothing. This plebiscite is a very old voting technique that was originated in Rome. They used to have plebiscites. And it was a way, you guys know the old, like, lesser of 2 evils argument. Have you guys heard that? Yeah. Like, when we pick our presidents, generally, it's the lesser of 2 evils. There's only going to be 2 options, and they both suck. So you pick whichever one sucks less, right? You guys understand that? The plebiscite is designed to put the voter in a lesser of 2 evils situation. So you write something and like some of it's good, but some of it's not awesome. And then you write another option or whatever, and a different part of it's good, but the other part sucks. And so ultimately the people who wrote the Constitution are going to get what they want, right? And the people got to decide, do I like it or not? Like, as opposed to not having a Constitution, it's better than nothing. But do I like the Constitution? Absolutely not. And so it puts people in a lesser of two evils vote, and they generally give the government what they want. Or the government gets what they want out of it. The consulate lasts for the first 5 years of rule. He has unlimited power, and a big thing, he made a point to not reinstate feudal law, mostly for the lower class. Like, look, you're not going to be tied to the land anymore. It's cool, no serfs, no slaves, right? We don't like, that's weak. That's the biggest reason. Questions there? All right. Moving on to the Napoleonic Code. Napoleonic Code is essentially all of the laws and like the rules that Napoleon essentially put forward during his reign between the dictatorship and the imperial or the emperorship. So he basically is a total dictator. He's going to dictate social, economic, military, everything, cultural. Right? One of the things he establishes is the national bank. Right? It's the central financial institution. Right? Is a national bank good? Who owns the national bank? One more time. Well, in particular, it's the government, right? Napoleon at the end of it, but the government owns it. Who owns all the banks in America? They're all private. America doesn't have a national bank. We don't have a bank that the government owns, right? It's basically illegal nowadays to have a national bank because the reason it was a huge argument back when our country was created. Some people felt like the government should be responsible for sort of guiding the economy and through the national bank. And some people felt like if the government gets control of the bank, then the government's going to take all the power and all the money because they were always afraid of kings, right? So a national bank, our banks are all private, so those banks are all for profit. Every bank in America is trying to make money for the company, right? So is that good for you? Not usually, because they're greedy. But at the same time, they have to abide by a structure of laws that the government establishes. So it's not bad for you, okay? Can be, but it's not always. If the government owns the banks, then the government does the lending. The government makes money from doing the lending. Hopefully puts the money in a good place, but potentially could just put the money in a bad place, like Louis' pocket, right? So it's some countries have them, some countries don't. We don't. I don't know if it's good or bad. Seems fine to me. They have one though. He creates this national bank. So when they lend money, who makes money? The government does, right? If Napoleon uses that money productively, that's a fantastic plan. If he builds up the education or builds up the military or whatever, that's awesome. If he puts that money in his pocket, like Louis would have, not so good, right? Louis would have bought the high heels and wigs, and that would have been bad, okay? Napoleon runs this bank. He increased secondary education. Part of the thing that Napoleon realized was that the National Convention had it right as far as the education of citizens. In order for citizens to be productive, they need to be educated. So he's going to focus on that. Mostly he's going to focus on secondary education. high school, college, and trade schools. Elementary level education is going to be run by the church. Most people in France are what religion? Catholic. They are Catholic. So the Catholic Church is going to run most elementary schools, which leads us to the Concordat, which is the deal that Napoleon makes with the Pope. Because do the Catholic Church and the French government get along? Why not? Yeah, because one of those governments during the Revolution took all the land, right? Does that make them mad? Yeah, it makes them broke too. That made them upset, right? And they fought quite a bit during the revolutions, the different governments. So Napoleon, understanding the importance of having the church at least be sort of friendly, reaches out to the Pope, and they reach the Concordat. Okay, Concordia, not the same. So you guys remember the civil constitution of the clergy that the Legislative Assembly wrote, basically saying like the government's going to be in charge of all the churches, and they're going to like pay the priests and bishops and like make the rules and stuff. You guys remember that constitution? Well, that makes the church real upset, and they don't like that much. So in 1801, Napoleon ended this conflict by reaching an agreement with the Pope called the Concordat. The Concordat recognizes that most French citizens are Catholic. So cool, you can be the primary religion in France, but France still has religious tolerance, right? You can be whatever you want to be. So basically he's telling the Pope, look, everybody in my country is Catholic, so don't come in my country and tell everybody they have to be Catholic. Like they already are. But if they're not, leave them alone. Which is fair, right? He also makes the church, or pressures the church to accept that we're never giving that land back. So stop bitching about it, right? Give up your claims to that land. You're never getting it back. They took it, I didn't take it, but I'm not giving it to you, so freaking get over it. Does that make sense? Okay, so the church gave up the claims to the confiscated land taken by the Legislative Assembly. And now that they gave up that land, do they have any big gripes against Napoleon or the French government? Is there anything to complain about if you're the church? No. So we're going to get along now. Yay. Questions? We good? That's Napoleon as dictator, sort of figuring out what his role is going to look like, sort of figuring it all out. Then once the people feel like, all right, we got it figured out, and Napoleon's got it figured out, and Napoleon's strong, and France is sort of over those fights they were with Austria and Russia and Britain, and they're ready to sort of go in a different direction, they're going to make Napoleon the emperor. Okay? So, Napoleon's supporters wanted to make his power permanent and hereditary. What's that like? It's a king. Yeah, that's what that is. In another plebiscite, in another one of those like lesser of two evil votes, in 1804, the French people voted to declare France an empire. Napoleon became Emperor Napoleon I, and his wife became Empress Josephine. To mark the beginning of the empire, the Pope came to Paris to crown the couple. Okay, because now the Pope and Napoleon are cool, and he's going to be emperor now. So the Pope's going to come, and he's got to participate